My name is Sagita Mirjam Sunara, and I teach at the Conservation Department of the Arts Academy in Split, and I also serve as a Vice Dean of the Arts Academy. I will talk about the digital repository of the conservation of art in public spaces, or CAPuS project. Next slide, please. This project started in 2018 and will last until June next year. And the funding has been provided through the Erasmus Plus program. On this slide here, you can see who the project partners are. So these are higher education institutions, companies, research centers, NGOs, and cultural institutions from 5 European countries. Next slide, please. Our project CAPuS focuses on contemporary public art. Now, contemporary public art, as we all know, comes in many different forms, but we have decided to focus on murals, graffiti, and sculptures. And the project has 2 goals. First, to develop guidelines and protocols for the protection and conservation of such artworks. And second, to develop training opportunities for students and professionals alike. And for this talk, I will focus on the first goal. Next slide, please. Now, developing guidelines and protocols has been a 4-step process. First, a number of artworks were selected and their historical context was studied. Then a technical study was carried out and conditions reports were produced for a number of artworks. Then a number of products and conservation methods were extensively tested. And finally, and this is the stage that we are in now, methods and products that have proven themselves effective are being used in the conservation treatments on the artworks that have been studied. Next slide, please. Now, through this project, a lot of expertise has been acquired, and this expertise will be passed on through university course and an e-learning platform, which are being developed as a part of the project. But we also want to share the data that we have collected and generated through the project. And it is for this reason that we have created CAPuS Digital Repository. So what kind of data am I talking about? Next slide, please. Well, it can be anything from a representative photo of an artwork to an artist interview or a laboratory analysis report or treatment documentation. Next slide, please. And this is how this data is organized within the digital repository. So we start with some very basic information about the artwork, like artist's name, title of the artwork, year of making, etc. But we then move on to more in-depth information, such as publications in which the artwork has been featured or representative photos, then any archival materials that have been collected, then artist interview, and so on. And now let's see how this looks online. Next slide, please. This here is a screenshot of a page that lists all the sculptures that are currently in the database. 39 sculptures have been studied in the project, and these are all now in the database. And if I was to click on one of these thumbnail images, next slide, please, a page would open that shows all the data about that single artwork. Now, this here is a sculpture from a collection that I'm working on, CSAC Steelwork Sculpture Park. And the data that we have for this sculpture can be classified into several categories, which you can see on the slide, like artwork information, art historical context. Sorry, if we can just go back to the previous slide. Examination and analysis. And one thing that we don't see here, for example, is objects condition. And if I was to upload a condition report into the repository, we would see it on this page here. Since it's not in the repository, we can't see it. Next slide, please. Now, it's really challenging to present a website through a PowerPoint presentation. So what I was trying to show on this slide here is some of the data or some of the materials that you will be able to access through this repository about the artwork that we just saw on the previous slide. So for example, a paper explaining this artwork's fabrication and display history, as well as high-resolution photos, are available in the section titled Artwork Information. And for example, if you were to click on this section titled Documentation, then you could access technical drawings. Next slide, please. You can search the repository by going through the pages of individual artworks, that is by clicking on those thumbnail images of the artworks in the database, but the repository is also equipped with a very powerful search engine. Next slide, please. And now creating this repository was my idea, and I designed the basic structure, but it would not have seen the light of day if it was not for this young gentleman that you can see on this photo. This is Tony Tabak. He's an extraordinary IT expert. He programmed the repository from scratch, and he was also responsible for the page design. Next slide, please. CAPuS Digital Repository will be launched either at the end of this year or at the beginning of the next one. It will be an open access repository, and it will be available through CAPuS website. So I invite you to keep an eye on our website and on our Facebook page too, because that's where we post project updates. Thank you very much for your attention.